This is the King Country Rural Roundabout, brought to you in association with Beef and Lamb New Zealand and the Trunk 88 FM, homegrown, right here in Taumarunui.
This week I'll be talking to Dan Steele from Blue Duck Station, Esther Guy Meakin, who is Beef and Lamb New Zealand's Senior International Trade Manager, and Rob Sherson from Cheyenne Angus Stud. And it's my pleasure to say a very warm welcome to Dan Steele from Blue Duck Station. Dan, I was looking at your mission statement and it says that the core values are to conserve the endangered wildlife, increase the health of the native bush and rivers, and to preserve the history of the area while educating visitors about the endangered New Zealand blue duck and other native species. Tell us a little bit about that just to start off with. I want to get into a couple of other things, but I really like that mission statement.
Yeah, good as. Look, we think it's a pretty special place out here. We're surrounded by the Wanganui National Park and Wanganui River, Retaruki River, beautiful hill country, rainforest. We're lucky enough that the land's pretty rugged and it's still sort of held on to a lot of those special native species that are gone from other areas, like such as the blue duck.
Yep.
So people haven't been able to develop all the land in there, so the blue duck habitat has been sort of left untouched in some places, and sort of is where they tried developing all the farms of the bridge to nowhere. Well, the bush is coming back and the stream health's coming back, so the blue ducks are again doing quite well in that high water quality. We've got pretty rugged hills that are still got a really good population of kiwis in there because it's perfect habitat for them, and a lot of other invasive species sort of haven't been able to thrive out here. So it's a beautiful place, it's a rugged place, and the mission statement of looking after Mother Nature sort of essentially says that, well, Mother Nature's our habitat too. This is our home, you know. We want clean water and clean air and good quality food to eat. So from our farms, we want to be producing environmentally produced sort of food, and we want to be able to look after our home. And if we can't do that and make our environment better, well, humans are getting it bloody wrong on this planet. So that's where our values come from.
One of the interesting things too, we talk about the whio or blue duck. They're unique to New Zealand, aren't they? And they're only found in New Zealand. And one of the reasons that they survive is because nature has got it right for them.
Yeah, they're endemic to New Zealand. And yeah, the blue ducks, it's hanging on, but it is a great indicator species for the health of an environment, the blue duck. So if you get anything wrong, if you have too many predators, or your water quality's wrong, or you cut down too much forest and affects your stream quality, the blue ducks can't survive in that habitat. So if you've still got blue ducks around, like up in the Tongariro National Park and down here in the Wanganui National Park, if we've still got blue ducks there, your habitat's going pretty well. And if you look after the blue duck, you look after everything else in that whole ecosystem, water quality, all your aquatics, right through your rainforest, including your kiwis and things, native bats. They're all looked after if you're looking after them.
One of the other things too about the blue duck is you hear them before you see them, don't you?
You often do. The male's very vocal. He gives a nice shrill whistle, and if you hear a whistle in a rainforest stream down on the water, it's likely to be a blue duck, and you'll hear them 50% of the time before you see them in the bush here.
One of the other interesting things is that you took off overseas, I think around 2015 for an OE, and came back to the station, didn't you? And sort of get it going.
Yeah, look, I did my OE, I suppose you'd call it, a lot earlier than that, back in 90 sort of 97, 98 sort of thing. But that was sort of heading off overseas with a bit of sport and a bit of travel in mind and seeing the world for 18 months, which was great. But then I came back and sort of set up Blue Duck Station, and in 2015 I went off again doing the Nuffield Scholarship. I was lucky enough to be involved with Nuffield Scholars, and that's sort of the focus there is around a worldwide network of scholars that are trying to produce better food more sustainably, and we're trying to get all the main food producing countries on the world sort of involved with it, and it's got some big goals, and but it's a real sort of knowledge sharing and networking focused group. And for me down here, I'm an advocate for Mother Nature, and I'm lucky enough I've got thousands of guests come down and see me, and I sort of felt that I should really get myself a bit more grounding on what New Zealand's plan for the future should be with our land management, with our food production, and I saw no better way to do that than the Nuffield Scholarship. And because I talked to so many people, I thought I want to go out and test my theories, if you like, putting the environment first and Mother Nature into our story of New Zealand am I thinking right, or should we just be, producing everything we can, or what's our best plan going forward? And so the Nuffield Scholarship was a great education, heading to 15 countries in 2015 to see what they're doing right and wrong, learn from both their achievements and their mistakes, and see what New Zealand's plan should be going forward.
Now, some of these countries that you visited, were some of them, I don't want to say third world, or were they all pretty developed countries?
No, quite a spectrum. With some very developed countries through to places that are in all sorts of strife, like India with so many issues, that are very third world in places. Population of going on 1.4 billion and not too many rubbish bins or toilets. Incredible problems over there.
What sort of stood out there? I know you talk about India and so forth, and we probably all have a pretty good idea of what the conditions are like there, but what were some of the things that you saw and went, we can improve on this?
The things that stood out, I suppose, is just how special and unique New Zealand is. So many countries in the world have overdeveloped themselves. They've got very few wild, beautiful resources left, and they're able to produce a lot of food themselves, but the quality is not there, and the quality of life in those countries is not there. And so a lot of their products, they've really got no backstory. If you don't like a country and for its sort of its aspect and its environmental sort of history, you're very unlikely you're going to want to buy products that are produced in that country, because you're not going to trust them to be a healthy, well-produced product. And New Zealand, we've still got a really special place here. We've got no neighbours. We've got a huge, big coastline and a huge biosecurity, natural ocean biosecurity all around us, and we can really put our mark on everything we produce, do a really good job, and fetch a premium on the world stage.
Yeah, we do that quite successfully, don't we, with our beef and lamb and so forth. And
no, not really. No, not anywhere near enough.
Okay, yeah.
No, like you go over to overseas, and a lot of the times New Zealand lamb is the cheapest in the supermarket, and so we're not a premium brand in a lot of respects around the world. America can buy lamb out of New Zealand, and they can just go to the cheapest. They'll just play off one exporter to the other and see who's going to sell it for the cheapest. So we're not fetching a premium on the world market at all, like we should be.
Okay, so really we've got to look at that and lift our game. How do you see us doing that?
I see having an environmental plan and strategy, and a whole business plan for agriculture, the environment, tourism, all integrated, and sending and selling that to the world.
But I guess at the moment, with the whole COVID thing going on, there's no better time than to start not reinventing, but looking at what we're doing and trying to bring this together. And I know that the freshwater objectives are underway, and trying to make our waterways, for a start, a lot cleaner. Yes. And I understand that Damien O'Connor on Friday spoke in Tikawiti about that. Do you see that as being positive?
Yes, I do. I haven't actually looked at the reforms in any great detail, but I think that they seem to have struck a balance, that saying, hey, look, we've got to lift our game, but we've still got to be allowing our farmers to produce and be productive. We can't hamstring them, and it's not fair to just stop fertilising overnight or anything like that. It's I think they've struck a reasonable balance between the environment and the production.
And I think one of the initiatives that they're talking about is cattle. I think they've got to be 3 metres. The fencing's got to be 3 metres from the water, and they can't sort of come down and graze and things like that. Does that work for you?
In a lot of our steeper country, it's really hard to achieve, but we're going to have to look at some innovative ways to do that. In some of our really steep country, we may have to look at different land uses, keeping the cattle off it. Yeah, virtual fencing of the future. We may be able to have, this virtual fencing where you can have an air tag in an animal that stops it going into certain areas, stops it going near streams and things. That's sort of technology that could help with that in the future. But personally, for a lot of my country, it should have never been broken and out of bush. So I'm fortunate I can regenerate Mānuka native bush, and I can make an income from that, from honey, you know.
You know, that's something you're doing too, isn't it? Is bringing that bush back to what it was through your plans and so forth. And living bush is really something that's so vital to this country. It's unique to New Zealand.
It is. You know, we've got a completely unique environment and unique biodiversity here, and we're pretty fortunate that we are able to create some high-value products from that too. You know, as you say, before COVID-19, one of those was tourism, but that's taken a pretty huge hit. It'll come back, but maybe we should sort of take check and reinvent our tourism a little bit too, because I don't think we were getting that quite right as a nation previous to this. You know, we were probably focusing a little bit too much on the numbers and not enough on the quality, and I think we should have a bit of a reshape there.
I think you make a valid point because, you know, let's be honest, the average Kiwi is not really in a position to afford to go and spend a week in Queenstown. But, you know, you can get a group together and you can come down to Blue Duck Station. Everything that I think anyone needs is right on our doorstep. And I know that, you know, there's a lot of activity taking place. You've got the Bridge to Nowhere, you've got the historic buildings and roads, the Papa Drives. I want to talk a little bit about that because the Whakahoro post office has been renovated, hasn't it? And that's right there.
Yeah, look, we've got all sorts of cool little buildings, and it's I've always seen this sort of place as a working museum. We're one end of the Bridge to Nowhere settlement farms, and we're farming some of that land still in the bush, although we are reverting a lot of it and making more money out of Manuka honey than we are out of farming in there now. But it's still it's beautiful stories and beautiful history, and all those little buildings, I want to see them preserved, and you learn from the history, and it's a fascinating history. Yeah, it's really important to have that and have our stories protected in New Zealand.
Yeah, I mean, just simply we take the Bridge to Nowhere. How many people have actually know where it is and have been down there? Okay, probably a lot of tourists, but how many locals have actually been and walked across that bridge, which sits, 40 kilometres down the river, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's a 40 kilometre from our cafe here. It's 40 kilometres on a mountain bike. It's about 60 kilometres via the river. Yeah, and that's a good point. I haven't got an answer to that question. What sort of percentage of you know, locals and or New Zealanders go to these places? That's a good question, Brian, because you know, a lot of it was international guests, and it's a cool bridge and it's a beautiful day out, etc. But that history doesn't actually mean a whole lot to an international guest, whereas to a New Zealander, you know, those were the returned servicemen farms from World War One, and those guys have got a connection to every single person who calls himself a Kiwi.
Absolutely, and this is the thing, and I mean, I think my granddad I think they worked on it round about, I think, the early 30s, and I think it was finished about 36 or something, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. Yep.
And as you say, our settlers, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, they were the ones that came back from the Great War and resettled onto the land, and they broke in a lot of that land. And one of the things I remember my granddad saying was that every tree I took out, I planted 3.
Yep.
And that's how it survived. I don't know, there is something about that, and it's our heritage, and it's something and it's something that we must be very proud of. And one of the interesting things about the station is that you can go down there on a mountain bike. It doesn't matter if it's in the winter or the summer, and I know lots of people do it.
Yeah, it's become a very popular mountain bike ride. You know, not quite as popular as the one on the northern part of our area, the Timber Trail. That's been a fantastic, you know, success story. But this Bridge to Nowhere ride and the history associated with it is it's become very popular also, and it's becoming more a part of what we do out here, yeah.
You know, I tend to love old buildings, and I had an old house at one point, and I went in there and I thought, I wonder who's lived here. It wasn't until I pulled the walls apart and found newspapers going back to 1910, 1911. And here was a history hidden behind the walls, and I think the post office kind of reflects that a little bit, doesn't it? And I know it's something that you've been renovating for quite a while. Again, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, look, the post office was just a cool little building that was part of one of the farms when I bought it. It was being used as a chook house, actually, so probably had been done for many, many years, but you could still see the history, and once we cleaned the walls off, you could still see, you know, some of the old writing on the walls, and people's the post office, the postmaster writing people's names and how much money they owed and things like that on the wall in pencil. And that was a post office that was used to service the Wanganui riverboats. So the mail would come up from Wanganui or down from Taumaranui on the riverboats and get dropped at Whakahoro here. And the farmers from up the Retaruki Valley and from the abandoned farms valleys down this end of the Kai Whakauka would come through to here to pick up their mail. So really neat and rich history behind every one of these buildings when you think about the pioneering stories around them and how they started.
Yeah, and the slog that these guys, putting the wool on the barge on the riverboat at Wade's Landing, and the bridge, the Whaikokaura Bridge, that's been done up, hasn't it, to an extent?
The original bridge just collapsed a few years ago out in the Kai Whakauka there. It was an Australian hardwood truss bridge, also a bit of tautara in there, and that collapsed into the gorge on a fine sunny day in December not too many years ago. So we have rebuilt that bridge now, and we're hoping to use some of those old original beams in some of our buildings and some of the history around here to sort of preserve it and keep it in the area.
Oh, look, it's just a wonderful area. I don't know, there's something unique about it. The mist in the morning, that rises, and the bush, and standing there, the serenity of it. It is, I don't know, to me it's something very, very special. And we don't see that in a lot of parts of New Zealand. It brings me to another point. We talk about tourism, and one of the things that you do down there, and I think it was it last weekend? You had a group in over the weekend shooting away and whatnot. You've made that a pretty good feature. Blue Duck Lodge, you've got the Frontier Lodge, the River Quarters, the Fio Lodge, and what's the other one? The Warrior Lodge, isn't it?
Yep. Yes.
If somebody wants to come down for a weekend or whatever, obviously they come down in a group. I think the lodges will accommodate a number of people, don't they?
Yes. Yeah, we've got plenty of beds. We've been set up for the international tourism as well as domestic, and the domestic's always been really important to us. So we're pleased right now that we've done a pretty good job of keeping in touch with all our domestic guests, because they're our bread and butter now. Yeah, we've got a variety of lodges where you can come down, and if you're a couple or on your own, or a family group, work group, anything, you can book in, come down here, do everything from go for a walk in the bush to learn how to hunt, shoot some clay birds. Our guides will teach you to hunt, teach you to field dress the animals. And the beautiful thing about learning to hunt out here is it's part of conservation, because we need to keep the goat numbers down, we need to keep the deer numbers down. So it's an activity we can put on that's good for the environment. Yeah, we've got horse trekking, jet boating, all sorts of ways to see our station in the Wanganui National Park, and we love sharing it with people, showing them the history, show them a blue duck, and tell them about how much we love the land and why we're trying to look after it, and why that's part of New Zealand's story. Absolutely,
and I think one of the things that also is important, and I know, Māori and European both lived there together comfortably. They all worked together, didn't they? And that's the interesting thing about it. Now, with the current environment, and I know nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, but I think one of the things that I believe is that we're in a situation now where we're not going to see international tourists in New Zealand for quite a long time, and I think it really does. See your own country first. You're right on our doorstep. You go out on the main road and you turn off by Oio there, and down you go, down to the Rederuki, and bingo, you can't miss it, can you?
Follow your nose right down Oio Road to the very end, and we're on the Wanganui River, and it's a rich bit of New Zealand history out here. Yeah.
Now, how can people get in touch if they want to make a booking and get down there, Dan? What do they need to do? Give you a call? Go to the website?
Simple. Give us a call. Our phone number 0789562276, or just look up at our website. It's pretty easy. We're just blueduckstation.co.nz, and all the contact details are on there. And all people have to know is if you Google Blue Duck or Blue Duck Station, you're going to find us.
Ironically, I had you wouldn't believe it, yesterday, a message from TripAdvisor saying, hey, do this and that. And I thought, I'm going to have a look. And I started reading some comments, and man, incredible stuff. People, they love the food, they love the cafe, they love the accommodation, and what better way, even this, this long weekend, we're probably a bit short now, but hey, we've got Labour weekend coming up. There are weekends, people can get away on a Friday and spend a weekend down there and be absolutely catered for. It's as good as any, in my opinion, of any other lodge anywhere in the country. And the good thing about it is that Blue Duck Station is right on our doorstep.
No, we love sharing it, and look forward to welcome a few Kiwis and sharing our country with our fellow New Zealanders.
One final comment. Where do you see us moving in the future? How do you see us going? Do you think we are going to embrace the environment now and really start to think about it?
I hope so. I really do. It's really our strength on the world market is how beautiful and unique and far away from everyone else we are. And that's our point of difference. That's what we've got to look after. We've got to protect everything that makes New Zealand special with every last drop of our blood. Everywhere else, they can produce their own cheap food. We've got to get out of playing in any of the cheap food markets, and we've got to focus on absolute quality, adding value to what we do. And there lies the success for New Zealand's future.
You're listening to the King Country Rural Roundabout in association with Beef and Lamb New Zealand on the Trunk 88 FM. Homegrown, right here in Taumaranui.
Facing challenges or looking to try something new in your farming business? The Beef and Lamb New Zealand's Knowledge Hub has a huge range of material from other farmers and industry experts to help you get the information you need to make informed decisions. You can find everything from animal health to the zero carbon bill on the Beef and Lamb website in a range of formats, including articles, resource books, podcasts and videos. Check it out, www.beeflambnz.com.
It's my pleasure now to welcome Esther Guy-Meakin to the show. Esther is the Senior Manager for International Trade with Beef and Lamb. I'm going to start off by saying I've read a bit about your background, and you've been all over the place, really, haven't you? In India, sort of looking after trade interests there. And you really do manage and develop the oversight of Beef and Lamb New Zealand's trade activity, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. I started off my trade career with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and that took me over to India with the New Zealand High Commission based in Delhi. And now, of course, I work for Beef and Lamb. And as you say, I manage international trade, which means that I basically look at the sector's interests on international trade and basically advocate and fight for the sector's interests on all things trade.
One other little thing I discovered is that you spent a bit of time in Chile as well. Now, that's a pretty big beef producing country, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. No, I did spend quite a bit of time in Chile, particularly during university.
How do we stack up in comparison with our beef?
Well, fantastically, of course.
Good, yes.
Am I allowed to say anything else?
Well,
no. Look, New Zealand produces an amazing world-class product, and
absolutely,
and we're well known for it. And you see our products all over the world in all sorts of places.
What I do want to talk about is the way the red meat sector's been affected by the COVID-19 impact. What has happened there?
So we were really impacted in two key ways. One was the supply chains were affected, and that was because in key markets, so China, which was the first to be affected by COVID, due to staff shortages, but other sort of implications for the logistics and supply chains, we faced a number of delays at ports and getting our product over the line there. And we've kind of seen that shift as COVID has affected other markets as well. And then the second way that we have been affected is the shutdown of food service in a range of markets, New Zealand included, as governments have tried to implement measures to sort of stop the spread of the virus. And food service is a really important part of the sector's profit margins and our strategy. I mentioned when you asked me about Chile, you see New Zealand product in high-end restaurants across the world. And so, that was a really significant impact for us as well.
It must have been quite hard because, demand would have fallen as restaurants closed right around, not only in New Zealand, but around the world. And I guess that it led to a bit of change in consumption patterns as well. People cooking at home, a lot of the high-end restaurants, as you say, and restaurants in general closing down, people had to sort of adapt, didn't they? What impact has that had on the industry, seriously?
Yeah, because the food service industry does make up a significant part of our sector's exports, that had quite a swift impact, I guess, on the demand for our product. But equally, we saw our companies really step up and very quickly change the product mix that they were exporting and look for customers in a different way. And you're right in that as these kind of lockdown measures got implemented, consumers started having to buy product and cook at home. And so actually that's been a really good opportunity for the sector as well, because, we have seen an uptick in retail demand, but also, customers have been interested in trying new things and new recipes. And I think, kind of reverting back to that comfort food, and red meat will always be part of that comfort food kind of movement. So that's been a good opportunity for us at the same time.
I know that earlier on in the show I was talking to Tony Egan, and he was saying that one of the biggest problems they were faced with was getting supply out of the country, making sure that it got on the boat and it actually went to where it was going. Have you found that that's been sort of a bit of an impact?
Yeah, that was definitely part of the problem. But I have to say, we've worked very closely with our Meat Industry Association partners and also government. It's been a real team effort, and the New Zealand government very quickly realised that supply chains were a huge issue for our exporters. And, I have to commend Minister Parker and his officials for the work that they did to keep those supply chains open, not only in respect of trade policy and ensuring that protectionist measures weren't being put in place, but also just from a practical side. They supported opening air freight links very quickly, and, they did a lot of work that I think, our sector certainly benefited from as well.
And of course, China is one of our biggest exporters, isn't it? They import, a fair bit. I think I read somewhere that the percentage dropped down quite considerably, and then as things started to lift up a little bit, up it went again, and it was offset by increases in value of the overall exports to North America, North Asia, Japan and Taiwan, Malaysia, Middle East, UK. Has that stayed?
What crises tend to do is really highlight in quite a brutal way the resilience in sectors, or not, as the case may be, and, the strengths and weaknesses. And I think, for our sector, one of the good things, I guess, to come out of this crisis is to really demonstrate actually that the sector has strong fundamentals. And part of those fundamentals is our diversification strategy in terms of trade policy. So we export to over 120 countries around the world. And while we do export a significant proportion of that to China, in a situation where that market and demand in that market kind of closes up very swiftly, we were also able to, lean on relationships in other markets and the market access that we had achieved in those markets and kind of shift product. So while, as you say, we did see quite a sharp decline in exports to China, we also saw exports lifting to other important markets like Japan, Korea, Taiwan, the Middle East and the United States. And we've kind of seen, as COVID has moved around the world, our exports kind of shift with that. So I think that's been a really important part of our response to COVID, and it's been great to see that strategy is kind of really benefiting us now.
One of the other little questions is obviously the impact on labour, because that must have been a logistical nightmare, getting people to keep those chains open and working away. How did you deal with that?
Well, that was really more for our colleagues at the Meat Industry Association and companies. But, I have to, again, commend the work that they did and the processors did to ensure minimal disruption. I think level 4 was very challenging for them, but We saw again very quickly companies adapting their operating protocols to ensure processing could continue as much as possible. And we have very quickly gone back to a situation where we, are more or less operating as would be expected. And I think, if you look around the world at our fellow sectors in, the United States, for example, I think, we can be very proud of the effort that our companies have made to protect workers, but also to continue to operate through this kind of crisis.
Has there been a lower demand because of this, because of the shutdown, etc., or has it stayed up, as you've said? It seems to be sitting pretty good.
Yes, demand has fallen a little bit, but as I sort of said at the beginning, I think it's also shifted. So, as demand in the food service sector, so restaurants and things like that, has kind of dropped away, it's also really peaked in the retail sector. So I think, overall there has been a little bit of a drop, but the story is mainly about that shifting of demand. Yeah.
One thing I read, and I'm not sure now where I read it, was that there's been an unprecedented demand for mince.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And I think that probably, kind of goes to how people react in times of crises and uncertainty. And I think, across the food production sector, different products saw a uptick in demand for staples and comfort food. And so, I'm sure every fellow Kiwi will have experienced the flour shortage as New Zealanders went into the Great Kiwi Bake Off during lockdown, and so I think mince is just part of that. It's a very versatile product, and you can make really great meals with it, and it's affordable as well. So I think that probably speaks more to consumer reaction. But I think too, more generally, we've been watching very closely some of these consumer trends, and I think what you've also seen throughout this is that consumers are very focused on healthy food choices. They're very concerned about the safety of their food, especially as there is some evidence that COVID resulted from a wet food market with exotic animals. And so, in that regard, I think New Zealand is very well positioned. We produce a fantastic product that's grass-fed, naturally raised, and New Zealand is world-renowned for food safety standards. And at the end of the day, red meat is a really healthy product that should be part of a balanced diet.
I think that's something that, we as Kiwis are very, very fortunate that all of our beef and our lamb is grass-fed. It's not stuck away in a shed somewhere being grain-fed and so forth. It's natural, isn't it? And that's where we kind of win out a little bit, I reckon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we take for granted sometimes that our production systems in New Zealand give us a real natural advantage because, as you say, they are antibiotic-free, hormone-free, naturally raised in a beautiful country. And I think, this crisis has actually really highlighted also the importance of that investment that we have been making in the Taste Pure Nature campaign and sort of really trying to emphasise and highlight the benefits, and the value proposition that New Zealand red meat can offer not only New Zealand consumers but around the world as well.
Now, I want to touch on Beef and Lamb New Zealand and the MIA, the Ministry or the Meat Industry Association. What's going on in terms now of moving forward? What's happening in that sector?
Yeah, so we've worked very closely. Well, I should say actually that Beef and Lamb and the Meat Industry Association, we work very closely, particularly on trade, regardless of COVID. But I think, our collaboration throughout this crisis on trade has been really great.
Yep.
And so we continue to work together with them on all things trade issues and beyond, actually. But I think, our sector is very aware that there are different phases to this COVID recovery. And so we're definitely looking at next steps and the opportunities that come out of this situation for the sector and how we can, best take advantage of those.
So what are some of those opportunities that you see, Esther?
Well, I think, as I just mentioned, I think, our sector is incredibly well placed to respond to some of the consumer trends that we knew were happening before this, but I suppose have been either accelerated or highlighted as a consequence. And so that's really about, telling our story as a high quality natural food producer, but also, the sector's contribution to the economy and putting food on people's plates. I think that's a really fantastic story and one that we will certainly be looking to highlight.
And you mentioned that, the government officials quickly put a whole host of mechanisms in place to ensure that they could effectively receive and respond to information, etc., coming from industry representatives. Elaborate a bit on that for me now, if you can.
When it became apparent that COVID was going to become a global situation, and that became very apparent to the government in early January, they very quickly pulled together a range of forums that allowed, I guess, good industry engagement. And I don't mean just for our sector. So MPI, as an example, MPI led a weekly phone call that still continues now among essentially all of the agriculture sector, or agriculture industry, And basically every week we would get together and that was an opportunity for the government to share with us what they were seeing, but it was also an opportunity for us to share with them what we were seeing. And then, if there were common issues or issues specific to us, it was a very useful mechanism to quickly solve those. So the communication has been great and the responsiveness, I have to say, has been great too.
And I believe MPI officials also rose to the challenge because they identified a number of export-specific challenges, didn't they, and jumped on it pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think, part of that was being able to sit around a table and have very open conversations about what we were seeing and what they were seeing. And also, being able to use that international network. MPI have staff, situated offshore, but so do MFAT. And actually so does Beef and Lamb New Zealand as well. And so, between our networks, both offshore as well as in New Zealand, we were sort of able to very quickly get a good picture of what was happening, how companies were being affected, how supply chains were being affected, and then work together to try and solve some of those issues.
And I know that, you mentioned too that the government moved pretty quickly and to support exporters by keeping open the air channels. How much of a logistical nightmare was that, or was it fairly free-flowing?
I think it was a logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
I know officials were working around the clock, including with Air New Zealand to support those air channels opening up as quickly as possible and working through teething issues. So, I don't have a huge amount of insight into what it was like for those people involved, but I suspect it was, a logistical nightmare.
I believe so. I know of one or two pilots that normally fly international, they were flying internationally, but passenger and 10-day stints of freight, leave home and 10 days later get back again. And it was like, wow. I was talking to somebody and they said, yep, they've been everywhere just delivering freight and they've kept those channels open. And I think the good thing there is that we've managed to do that. Little old New Zealand has managed to do that and we've kept those exports flowing, haven't we?
Exactly. And, exports are essential, especially to our sector. I mean, we export over 90% of everything we produce, and we're only a small country. We've only got 5 million people, so yeah, ensuring that we can continue to keep those supply chains open and our export channels open is essential. And I think, the government did well to support efforts on that.
Without getting into the whys and wherefores of it, we experienced lockdown. We've learned a lot of lessons, I think, as Kiwis. How do you see us moving forward?
Yeah, well, as I sort of said, or have said a couple of times, I think this is a really exciting time for the sector. And I think, despite the challenges ahead, there are some really great opportunities. And I think, our sector is underpinned by really solid fundamentals. Ultimately, we produce a high quality product that is sought after by customers in both New Zealand but also globally. And, we have real resilience built in to our supply chain, right from the farm all the way through to the processing companies and beyond. So I think that puts us in a really strong position to take up those opportunities. So I don't want to discount some of the challenges ahead because, there will be, and it is a very uncertain time, but I am very positive about the fundamentals that underpin our sector and the future for our sector as well.
The other thing too, I think, is that it's made us all sit up and take stock and realise, you know what? Farming is the backbone of this country. And that's something that I mentioned to somebody recently, and they said, yeah, well, at the end of the day, hey, you can't eat trees, you can't eat tourism. And I think that really did put it in perspective for a lot of people when they realise what we've got in this country, in the sense that we are basically a farming nation, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think that's a real positive out of this, is that it's highlighted the important role that food producers play in ensuring that food remains on the table. And, I think that's been a truth the world over, particularly in New Zealand too. I think it's been amazing to see that, the farming sector has been identified as essential workers, and that comes with a huge amount of responsibility, but it's a real privilege as well. Yeah, and I think, the challenge now will be to, continue to, I suppose, tell our story and tell New Zealand and our consumers all around the world about, what we do and why we do it, and the role and value that we play in society.
I think it's opened the eyes of the world that, little old New Zealand is actually kind of like sending, 90% offshore? Because somebody said to me, well, we've got the capability of feeding 40 million people right here on our doorstep. And I'm not sure, I haven't sort of fact-checked that one, but I believe that pretty much is something that is very, very evident at the moment, that it is, through Beef and Lamb New Zealand and the work that you do, it's keeping us going on that, behind the scenes internationally, and we are able to send off a lot of that produce, which perhaps, a lot of people aren't, aware of.
Yeah, no, exactly. 40 million people is the figure that the government and the primary sector uses. And that's right. I mean, we, New Zealand, more generally, not just our sector, but New Zealand feeds a lot of people around the world. And I think, in a time like COVID, a lot of countries aren't as fortunate as New Zealand to be a food basket in the same way that New Zealand is. And you see the food security issues that very quickly can develop. So I think, New Zealand should be very proud of our agricultural status and the contribution that our agriculture sector and our farmers make to feeding not only Kiwis, but the world.
I think that it also reflects on the work that you and your team do as well, because without people like you behind the scenes, a lot of what we see, we just take for granted, and we don't know what's actually taking place in the middle of the night or whatever it might be, to make sure that we keep producing and that we keep our exports going. And I think it's a credit to you and to Beef and Lamb New Zealand for the work that's being done, in the background there. I think that's something special.
Well, thank you. We do certainly work very hard to make it look effortless,
You're listening to the King Country Rural Roundabout in association with Beef and Lamb New Zealand on the Trunk 88 FM. Homegrown, right here in Taumaranui.
Learning on the go's easy with Beef and Lamb New Zealand podcasts. Beef and Lamb New Zealand has podcasts on a range of topics. Just open the podcast app on your phone and search for Beef and Lamb New Zealand. Once downloaded, you can listen to podcasts anywhere, including the car or the tractor. They're also available via your laptop on the Beef and Lamb Knowledge Hub. New podcasts are being released every week, and you'll find something to suit everyone.
And it's my pleasure now to welcome Rod Sherson to the show. Rob, you run Cheyenne Angus, and I believe the bull sales have been pretty good this time round.
We had our bull sale on Thursday. She was a new day for Taumaranui with Springdale Angus had dispersed and had their final sale last year, so we had a bit of rejigging. We got 3 Angus studs in Taumaranui, so we went at 11 o'clock, Black Ridge at 2 and Pukenui at 4:30. So yeah, she was a good day out.
How many bulls did you have in the sale, mate?
We put 43 up for auction on Thursday and sold 41 of them, so we're very happy with that result.
Tell me a little bit about how the bull sale worked this year round. I know it was quite different than it was last year. So how did it all take place? Just give us a rundown on that if you don't mind.
Sort of up until about 2 or 3 weeks before the sale, we're still unsure whether we're actually going to be able to hold one with all the restrictions that were in place, but no, we were able to go ahead. So just this year, what we had to do is obviously a bit of social distancing, and just as everyone arrived, we had them all write their name and number down for tracing purposes. And then when it came to serving cups of tea and food rather than people helping themselves, this year we actually had people there handing it out just to keep the touching of things to minimal. And and then just in the rostrum this year, we just had them spaced out just a little bit more than normal. But I think a lot of people this year had come on their own rather than bringing, a family day out. It was just sort of everyone was really good about it. They just came along by themselves this year just to keep the numbers down.
Where did people come from?
They came from all. We had quite a different crowd this year. We had a lot of people. A lot of bulls have been sold to Gisborne and Wairau area and down to Taihape, and then as far as as far as you can go up the Coromandel. So they've sort of been spread around this year, and then out to the west coast as well. So yeah, we've covered quite a area this year.
Explain what happens. How do you sort of catalogue the bulls and so forth and get everything ready for the sale?
We run sort of roughly 80 to 90 bulls and in 2 mobs right through until we sell a few as yearlings, but majority 2-year-old at the 2-year-old sale. But as they get better, we just sort of pick the ones out that we dwindle them down to roughly 50 bulls or so that are going to be catalogued, and then we're really working hard on just getting a line of bulls now too. So it sort of doesn't really matter whether you're buying in the first lots or the last, you're still getting a quality bull. So a big emphasis for us is structural soundness. So they've got to be able to have good feet and head and jaw and bone to carry a bit of weight, and temperament's a massive one for us too. There's nothing worse than something you don't want to be working with. So that's where we sort of start the basis from. And then we also use the EBVs. That's an estimated breed value.
Yep.
That's the paperwork that goes with the animal. That sort of comes in after that. So then we sort of, they've got to have reasonable paperwork to go with the animal. And that's sort of what our focus of breeding is at the moment. And we've put a lot of emphasis on rib and rump fat on our animals of late. And I think that sort of paid off a fair bit in these last couple of drier seasons, helps them get through the colder winters, but also when the tucker starts shortening up in the drier times, they've got something to fall back on a bit. And I think that showed in the bulls we sold this year. They're probably the best line of conditioned animals we've had up for sale for probably ever, and we think that's probably got something to do with it.
Right, yeah, and you and Tracy, along with your dad Brian and Mum, of course, run the stud out at Meads Road, don't you? Just out of town a bit. When it comes to like your auctioneers and so forth, who gets involved there? Where do these guys come from?
This year that was local New Zealand farmers agent Alan Hiscox was our auctioneer. It's run in partnership with between New Zealand farmers and PGG Wrightsons, but we also have outside companies coming and also local man Simon Bradley. He's a good supporter of our sale. So yeah, we sort of share it around a bit, but it is mainly those two bigger companies that run the day, and normally one company does the auctioneering and one does the booking, and then vice versa from year to year.
So now with the sale, obviously, all of the bulls go up online and so forth. Do you get a lot of support, or do you get a lot of people, say, from South Island or even across the ditch, or are they primarily local people within our area here, or is it more widespread?
No, that's widespread. You do get mainly from other stud breeders.
Yep.
From out of the area normally, from the maybe like that. If you're here, since you don't really sell a commercial bull down south, it's probably just a little bit too far to travel. But the studs down there, if we're breeding something that they're after, they quite often get in contact with you and they want videos of the feet and all that, because that's pretty much most studs. That's their first thing, is structural soundness to go with, and online sort of help that. And like in the area, they don't have to travel as far anymore to come and have a look, where they can now get videos and pictures and whatnot and do it from home. So if they like what they see to start with, then they're prepared to travel. So we were lucky enough to sell a couple of stud bulls this year. One went to Tingy House Station in Gisborne, and the other one went to Tururoa Stud in Wairau. So that was a bit of a perk.
Right, and you're running about, 250 stud cows, I believe, aren't you?
Yeah.
So now, with the bulls, okay, obviously they're there for producing and breeding and so forth. In terms of semen and so forth, how many straws roughly do they normally produce in a good season?
Well, every bull is completely different. It's more like when it comes to taking straws is quite a different game, because some bull semen doesn't freeze where others do, and some produce a massive amount of quality at one time and others don't. So that's quite different. But a lot of it's more on how many cows they will serve in a season, more than straws. So a good bull, he'll handle upwards of maximum of probably about 60 to 65 cows.
Yep.
Where others, if the semen quality is not quite up to it, they'll only sort of handle 35 to 40. But we have all of our bulls are semen tested prior to the sale, so they take a sample and check that it's all live and willing, but also at the same time they're checking the structure of the penis as all that kind of stuff. So you it's a good guarantee for the purchasers coming to look to know that the bull that they're buying has actually already performed and knows what he's doing.
Now, I want to ask you about Taimati Mako. He, I believe, was a pretty good bull and left quite a good line of cattle behind.
Yeah. No, we purchased him from Paul Hickman from Taimati Stud down there, just south of Blenheim and Ward there. Yeah, and he's crossed really well with our herd. He's left a beautiful line of cattle, not just in the bulls, but also the heifers as well. Like in the mob, you can pick them out straight away who they've come from. They're just nice, structurally sound and really well-fleshed animals. And yeah, they were quite sought after on Thursday.
Yep, and I believe also, his sons have done pretty well as well for you.
Yeah. No, they had a lot of interest on Thursday for after them guys, and prior to the sale, a lot of the questions we were asking about him and how he's bred for us. So no, he was a good purchase for us. It's not always, you don't always get that when you're buying outside blood, but that one certainly worked really well for us.
So it's pretty much a specialist area, isn't it? That not everybody goes into, production of bulls and so forth, but you guys seem to have nailed it out there, haven't you?
Yeah, well, my father's been doing it a long time. He bought his first two stud heifers in 1972, so he's got a bit of experience behind that. So it's definitely not for everyone. Like sale day is always good, and it looks like I could do that, but there's a lot of work that goes in behind it. With there's 3 months of calving, and we've got to catch every calf as it's just after it's been born and weigh it and tag it, and then the paperwork that goes into an animal is quite a lot, and you got to weigh them all the time to produce these figures and stuff. So there is a lot of work that goes in behind it. So it's not for everyone, but the people that do it really enjoy it. It's quite a satisfying job.
And that's the interesting thing about it, isn't it? As you say, it's satisfying because you see that progeny come through and you follow them through from basically the day they're born until the time that they leave on the truck, and you've got a good one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it's when you see them go off, and certainly when you get the feedback from your clients how happy they are and how well they've done with their stock, it certainly makes it worthwhile.
I was reading a bit of information about the fertility guarantee and so forth, that's on your website, and something that sort of struck me was the libido. Again, something that the bulls got to demonstrate the ability to mount an in-season heifer, don't they, or cow?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, some studs just strictly do the morphology, which is just the percentage of the quality of the semen. But anyone can get that out of a bull. But for them, some bulls just come in and they're not interested in the females for one reason or another. So that is a big plus side to the semen. Like the way we test our bulls, it is a lot more hands-on and more time-consuming, but it's more reliable for us too. So to say to the client, that what you're buying is what you're getting, rather than just that his semen's okay. He does actually know what he's got to do.
Yeah, and that's always the thing, isn't it? Because, the buyer wants a bull that's going to perform. That's what they're paying the money for.
Yeah, that's right. There'd be nothing worse than putting your bull out and then get to the end of the season and you've got a whole lot of dry cows. That's not what you've gone and forked your couple of thousand out for.
The sale takes place and they're sold, and then you've got to get the bulls delivered. How much work does that take in organising that to keep them safe, and do they go on a special truck, or are they just going with a regular cartage carrier?
No, it's mainly Ongaroo Transport, our local carrier that delivers them, and they do a really good job. They know the old man's always been very strict on cartage because there's no prodding or anything like that, because there's nothing worse than a nice quiet bull turning up at the other end and being a bit worked up. And it's also quite tricky at the other end. It's quite important to handle them quietly and have mates with them, preferably not the old size, because they'll sort of put them in their place straight away. But if you can have a steer or cow or two for them, because the bulls at our place have lived in the mob all their life, so all of a sudden they've had a big day being sold, like a lot of strange people and a lot of noise and all the other bulls around, and then they've gone for a ride on a truck which they're not used to, and then they've turned up to a foreign place and their mates aren't there and they're sort of wondering what the bloody hell is going on. So it is a big ordeal, and we try to take as much care as possible for delivering them, because they are worth a lot of money, and the last thing you want is them have worked up or hurt at the other end. So
absolutely,
it is a stressful time.
It is a stressful time, and I guess it's also a very important part of the sale. At the end of the day, it's making sure, as you've said, that those bulls arrive in top condition, not stressed out, not agitated, but they have that journey which is smooth for them. And as you say, Ongaroo Transport have been doing them for a long time, and they take care of them for you. And, the other thing too is that it also gives you the reputation, doesn't it, around the country of, well, these guys know what they're doing and they're good, and it brings people to your sale each year.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of feedback we do get from our clients is how quiet their cattle are. So we pride ourselves on that, because a quiet beast is going to hang around and eat its tucker. It's not running around the paddock or get it into the yards. It's not trying to bowl you over, and they're just a pleasure to work with, and you just enjoy your work a bit better with a quiet beast.
Now, I've got to ask you one question. There's a saying, red rag to a bull. Have you ever been in a situation where the bulls kind of confronted you and you got to run fast?
No, not particularly. Yeah. They can get worked up from time to time, but we've got a policy on our farm that anything that looks at us sideways doesn't live very long. So if you got to go and catch the calf at foot and all that, the last thing you need to be doing is racing around trying to hide from the bloody cow. So we spend a lot of time with the animals right through from, like you say, from when they're born right till they go off the property. So you get to know the animal, and anything that is going to be like that doesn't hang around, because we have a lot of people come on to the farm even before the sale. 3 to 4 weeks before the sale, we have people coming in and viewing the bulls. So the last thing you need to be doing is worrying about one that might bloody run out of the mob at someone. So, yeah, they don't last very long, those ones.
Hey, look, Rob, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I'm glad that the sale was successful for you. And look, we're going to follow the progress over the next, few months and so, and just we'll catch up again in the very near future.
Yeah, no worries. It was my pleasure.
That was the King Country Rural Roundabout, brought to you by Beef and Lamb New Zealand. Be listening same time next week for another edition of the King Country Rural Roundabout in association with Beef and Lamb New Zealand on the Trunk 88 FM, homegrown right here in Taumaranui.